Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Strategic Growth and Economic Activation Committee. I'd like to just acknowledge the apologies of Kitty Shiansky, Neville Byrne and Mayor Simone Bailey. And I would also like to welcome Steve Callery, who's our new tourism manager. You're very welcome. Glad to have you here.
So probably just worth going around and people introduce themselves for Steve as well.
Yeah, for sure. Fire away. We had a little chat in the car, but fire away. Sorry. You want to just say where you?
Yeah, so Steve, and yeah, so just started last week with council, and prior to that, I've been with ZSA and bicycle and Arto Square. The tourism experience questions.
So, Richard Strickland, I'm Matt Loader, I'm a community member of the committee, and live at Tunkill.
I'm Michelle Petosa, and I'm a project officer supporting the development of the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan. That's why I'm here today.
Jared, Manager of Development and Regulation.
Well, we know who we don't. Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourselves, folks?
Councillor Jen Davis, look, I'm councillor for Air Ward. Pretty much it.
Dave Hartley, Manor Motel, Rivershack Rentals, community member.
And I think that you do know each other anyway, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't hold that against me.
Okay, so let's do the acknowledgements of country. Mid-Murray Council would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land, the Ngadjuri, Nawang, Nangaraku, Nalkat, Ngarrindjeri and Karamak peoples of the Mid-Murray lands and waters. It's upon our ancestral lands and waters that the Mid-Murray Council meets and operates, and Council pays respect to elders past and present and their spiritual beliefs that are of continuing importance to those First Nations peoples of today. Council further acknowledges the contributions and important role that First Nations peoples continue to play within the community, and we extend that respect to any peoples in attendance here today. So we'll move to item 4, which is confirmation of minutes. So I'd like to ask someone to move and someone to second that we accept the minutes of the 29th of October meeting as read and confirmed. Thanks, Jen. Mover. We have a seconder from among those who have a vote. Yes.
I'm happy to say.
Thank you very much. Just ask the elected member, other elected member here, if there's any declaration of interest needed.
No.
No, neither have I. No deputations. We'll move on to the first item, which is item 7.1, Committee Work Plan 2024 to 27. And I'll just read the recommendation. The recommendation is that the Committee Work Plan 2024 to 2027 report on the Strategic Growth and Economic Activation Committee agenda of 28th of January 2026 be received. So can we have a mover and a seconder, and we'll then go into any discussion.
I can read it.
Thank you.
Someone's got it.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dave, for seconding that. So we'll go into the discussion now. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions relating to the work plan? You want me to go through it, or are you happy to take it as read?
Would people like a summary from Jared? I had just a question. But would people like a quick summary from Jared first?
It's up to Jared. And if he wants to, we've probably all read it, but sure.
Okay, so the Growth and Township Planning project, stage 1's completed. Stage 2 is on track, which is the spatial tool around both location planning and asset negotiation. That we're expecting to be, it's on track to be complete, core development by late January. Currently doing testing and feedback. And once that has the feedback and testings occurred, any additional requirements and refinements will occur.
I think the only thing just to add that's not on the report there because of where we are, we have submitted a further extension request to the completion date. So at this stage, I think we've asked till March. Yeah. Because the core testing or core development phase is obviously quite a significant part of this project. And particularly wanting our infrastructure team to have ability to test elements of the program. So Steve, for your background, the tools there to assist us in helping developers identify potential development sites for projects they want to undertake within the council area. And equally, once we start having a development application and then there are needs to negotiate infrastructure upgrades, for instance, council roads, stormwater water, that sort of thing, then that will allow us to negotiate what their contribution for upgrades or improvements might be. So that's working through at the moment through that testing phase, as Jared said.
So can I just ask, so how where were we meant to be at this point?
Well, at this point, the whole project was meant to be delivered by November last year. The growth strategy itself obviously was well ahead, but the spatial tool was delayed initially 6 months due to the person that they originally had engaged as the sub-consultant withdrew from the project. So then the process of then finding someone else to develop the tool.
So because this was the grant funding,
Correct.
From Fed, so there's not going to be. Is there? I assume there's not going to be a problem.
There's been absolute silence from them in terms of the extensions that we've requested. So we've just put the request in, and we haven't been told otherwise.
And the other question I had just apropos this, because I saw that we had the regional plan as being promulgated.
Yes.
Commission.
Yes.
Government. Whatever. And I noted there was a story, I think, in Rich News, and I'm standing one of them about like the growth, what the extra growth required for amongst other things with Murray Council. So can't remember what numbers were, but they were significant enough. So this is probably more a question which relates to the strategy than it does to this actual spatial tools per se, but I guess it's more just a point that we need the right position to resonate stuff, I suppose. Yeah. But it's also important to get it right. So
yeah.
I don't think we're going to lose anything by having a few months.
No. And it sort of relates to Project 3 of the regional plan. And while the regional plan itself has been now adopted by the government, the growth strategy itself, the changes that or the not so much changes, but the elements of our growth strategy that we would have liked to have seen in the regional plan didn't eventuate, primarily because of timing. And as you're well aware, Matt, in terms of government process, they don't like to necessarily, do last minute, amendments like that.
Yeah.
So we now need to work through a process where we identify those elements of our growth strategy that we see as a priority as an amendment to the regional plan moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the good thing is that they're adopting an approach to the regional planning stuff, as I understand it, which is rather than they publish a regional plan every 5 years and you have to wait until then, they're essentially saying it's a living document.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah. So we can effectively lodge.
So that's great.
Yeah.
That's exactly the right approach.
Yeah. So we can lodge the amendment tomorrow.
Yeah.
Request.
Yeah. But there's probably no point doing that too. But I was just, I remember there were definitely some targets that I can't remember all the numbers, but for some reason I've got 900 in my head of housing above what was theoretically zone supply. Yeah, as I recall, over the forward population.
So we'll now need to reevaluate now that both the regional plan and our strategy are complete. The next phase, I think, and possibly bringing it back to this committee at the next meeting is starting to sort of work out what priority targets we want to pursue as a council. We have, through our growth strategy, so we had 3 landholders who had very strong interest in rezoning property within their submissions. So the question is whether, as a council, we help facilitate those rezonings or amendments. It is quite interesting because the whole premise before was if you have something in the regional plan, the code amendment rezoning process was sort of more or less sort of a tick the box process. So hence why we were very keen to have our growth strategy reflected in the regional plan so that these landholders had an easy trigger. Officers in the department said to me, well, that's not as critical as it may seem. So just initiate a code amendment irrespective of what the regional plan makes up.
Okay.
So that still seems to be sort of counterintuitive to the sort of, the intent of having a regional plan to drive rezoning. So, so anyway, there is, I think now is opportunistic to reflect back on our growth strategy and work forward. Equally, it's not in the report. It is worth noting that there was released before Christmas a proposed amendment to the PDI Act, which puts emphasis on local government to produce a local action plan. Now, get ready for this, Matt.
I'm waiting. Sounds a little bit like local governments might end up having a development plan themselves one day, but anyway.
Yep, it's basically a revamp of the old strategic direction reports. So there's a requirement for councils to produce a local action plan. Now, the logic that was explained to me is that Greater Adelaide regional plan, the Metropolitan Council were encouraged to do a housing action plan, something along those lines.
Which would be under the housing roadmap, right?
Yeah. Yes. That they weren't necessarily forthcoming. So now they've introduced legislation to require councils to produce what were these housing plans as now local action plans, and applies to regional councils as well. So that's my understanding. So I haven't sort of followed up on where that proposed legislative amendment is at, but yes, if it means then we're going to be required to do a local action plan. It's template based, but effectively our growth strategy would be a major input in that direction.
So the other is we need to decide what our priorities are.
Correct.
And we just need to work in more elaborate process.
So I think for the next committee meeting, I suggest that we'll probably put together a little bit of a roadmap of our own based on our growth strategy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, economic development strategy. I have only really just scraped the surface with this. So I've really just come up with drafting a roadmap looking at investment and traction and community wellbeing, to aligning it with our strategic plan and regional priorities. Hasn't really gone much further than that at this stage. There is potential funding through the Sustainable Communities Program that I'm also looking at to see whether this is something that can fit into that funding. Regional planning, as Gary said, that's completed. Tourism precinct planning. This was so where we're at. We did 3-day schedule of site visits last week. I attended 2 of the days where myself and the consultants went out to look at the region as a whole, and they had it broken down to what areas were to what sub-project. It was actually a really informative couple of days. Went out to Milndanda, Shell Hill, Walker Flat, looking at different sites, potential sites for an observatory, planetarium. The Tuesday after the site visit, we had a meeting here, a project control group meeting here with the Section 41 committee, which was actually a very open and fantastic meeting where the consultants actually got to ask the Section 41 committee questions, where what their thoughts on the project were, where they thought an ideal location specifically for the observatory was the protection of Swan Reach Conservation Park. Yeah, so that's on track. Anything else, Gary?
No, that's all right. It's pretty much was outlined.
Those are questions I was going to ask, how did those meetings go? So that's fine. So is there would anybody else like to ask anything more about this report? If not, I will put the motion. So can we have we've already got a mover and a seconder, so we just need to have a show of hands regard to that. Happy? Everybody happy? Carried. Thank you. No. Okay, so the next item is the 7.2 Disability Action Access and Inclusion Plan 2026 to 2030 draft public consultation. And the recommendation, I'll just read that, is that the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan 2026 to 2030 draft for public consultation report on the Strategic Growth and Economic Activation Committee agenda of 28th of January 2026 be received. The Strategic Growth and Economic Activation Committee endorses the draft Disability Access and Inclusion Plan 2026 to 2030 prepared by Healthy Environments. Attachment 1, item 2, 7.2, Strategic Growth and Economic Activation Committee meeting 28th January 2026, and recommends Council approve the draft for public consultation. The Chief Executive Officer or nominee be authorised to make amendments of a minor and or technical nature to reflect feedback provided by the committee. Again, can I have a mover and a seconder for that motion, and then we'll have a discussion. Matt's moving, thank you, and Jen seconding, thank you. So we'll open the floor for discussion, questions. Any comments initially by?
Well, Michelle and I will
Yeah.
fend any questions, I think. I think it's worth noting that Healthy Environments were engaged, obviously, to prepare strategy. Correct me anywhere if I'm wrong in the summary, Michelle. I know you've been heavily involved. The requirement of the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan has to meet the requirements of the state government, particularly now with the new state level plan being endorsed. A template was provided by the Department of Health and Human Services to help guide local government in preparing this version of the data, whereas previously it was very much up to each individual council to do what they wanted to do. It reflects the domains that are within the state plan. and the consultants did what they were required to do. Their first draft was very comprehensive. And so when we took it to the senior executive team, we attempted to strip it back quite considerably to the sorts of things that would really be more impactful for a council of our size and our capabilities. Because again, typically, you know, one size does not fit all. So we really did try to pare it back. Personal view, I still think it is still probably bigger than it needs to be, but for a draft consultation, I think we're at a intermediate spot. And I think at this time, to see what the community and other stakeholders feel about the plan. Shall I add anything for that?
Probably that there are 16 mandatory measures that we need to be developing actions against to contribute to.
Only 16.
Only 16. But they are fairly
Typically that's set from that's set by DHS, isn't it?
Yeah, yep. So they're set as a part of the state plan, DHS. Those 16 are heavily concentrated in the first domain, which is inclusive environments and communities. One of the domains, which is health and wellbeing, there are no compulsory measures. And then that's the final 7 are split across the last 3. And so part of the refining of the plan went through and made sure that any actions that were in the plan very clearly spoke to those mandatory measures. And then probably the last thing which is worth mentioning is that the plans the actions are very much focused on embedding disability access and inclusion plans. Disability access and inclusion considerations into broader council strategies, policies, so that across all of council, it's considered in whatever it is.
Creates a culture of
Yes.
inclusion.
So yeah, changing the culture, but also giving some guidance, so that it is to be considered, not necessarily the primary consideration, clearly, because there will be a range of other things such as financial sustainability, but so that it's embedded and people are considering access and inclusion.
So effectively, we're sort of seeing it as one of the lenses that we must cast our eye over, when making decisions.
Been a long time coming.
So a question I have, or maybe it's just a question to be reminded of, what's the time frame for this meant to be? And like when did the state government next, when is their plan to next basically revisit this and we'll have to do all this all over again?
So initially, their plan is 25 to 29. And initially they were suggesting that had to be the same time frame for local government plans. But they were provided with some feedback, fairly consistent feedback, that our plans were not going to be starting until well into 2026. So they've changed their position.
So originally we were all due to have these completed by February this year.
All right, so related question on that is, what funding have they made available? Yes, I know the answer because I was simply making a point. So I know I've just moved the motion on chair, but I would like to request that as part of this process, maybe it might be when this document comes back for consultation, but that we write a letter to the relevant minister and premier and basically say, you're requiring us to do this thing and you've provided zip. And it's not possible for, and possibly we might want to write to some of our local MPs, etc. But I assume the consultation process, by the time we're actually going to get back on this, it will be, when will we come back on?
So this will go to the February council meeting.
So we won't be back until sometime in April or whatever, so we'll look past the.
Yeah. But your point is noted in that the draft document highly talks about our sustainability position. So it's been very much scoped around that capacity of council So we're being very cautious of that.
And so the only other comment I think, sorry if I'm talking before, but I did have one other comment. And I had the general view, which was this is a great strategic plan as in covering all these measures, but there's no way we're going to get all these things done in any near-term timeframe. Some of them are writing a policy or something, but even anyone who's written a policy framework right knows that it's quite a complex thing to do that, get it right and get it published. And that's just that. That's just writing a policy or developing a thing. So I think it's probably incumbent on two aspects. One is going out to consultation on this document. It's really important to really highlight that this is a strategic framework. It's not necessarily the case that everything will get done. Even within 4 years, I don't necessarily see all this getting done at all, right?
Yeah.
So that's important for me. The secondary thing is that I think it's important for council, and this is a matter for the elected members ultimately to think about, but I think it's important to try and pick one or two things out of this that can be a real point of focus and drive that you can say we have completed this over a time. My personal view on this is probably the most important thing that council could do is focus on public toilets. That's my sense. But imagine if we could say in 4 years' time that every single public toilet maintained by council met disability standards.
Including access to the toilet, which has been an issue.
That's right.
Already. Yeah.
Every single toilet had been audited, every single toilet, and those which hadn't been fully replaced have had all the relevant measures taken, and we have actually upgraded X, Y, and Z toilets to the unisex toilets or whatever it is. But whether it's toilets or whether it's something else, it's just I think that just in terms of being able to say something to community.
So,
I think being able to point to, we actually achieved this, and this cost this, and we had a program, we did it.
so part of the consultation would be asking people what their priorities are.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah. But bear in mind your suggestion of a letter, perhaps that can go into the report to council.
Yeah.
As a recommendation for us to consider. Yeah.
And it might be that there's also a question of talking to the MGA about that or to other stakeholders, but I think the obvious one is the minister's requiring us to do this plan in the legislation, which is great. We understand why, but council's like, our community do not have the capacity to suddenly just, find a lazy couple of $1 million to implement everything. We don't have that capacity. So without a grant program sitting around that helps our councils who have less capacity to pursue particular things, that makes it pretty difficult. It makes this a bit of not a wasted exercise, but it obviously makes it, it's a classic over-promise, under-deliver kind of scenario that will.
It's an obligation, though, to go through this process. That's the dilemma that they've set, isn't it? Really?
And to your point, the LGA have been very good in this space in terms of advocating on behalf of councils the complexity of the line bans. So that has been really.
This is my experience from when I was in government. This has always been a problem with disability claims, and even like thinking about disability access with existing buildings and upgrades. There's always a question of how do you force the issue forward when you don't provide funding, and not everyone's got the deep pockets to be able to include that. And while that doesn't mean it's not important, but it does. But it means that we haven't got the economics right of how these things are supported.
In legislative frameworks there to obviously deal with the issue with new build, but it's the old build and retrofit. That's where the funding lies as a problem, and obviously some buildings cannot be compliant due to their physical structure. And so that's the other issue we have as well.
I think the other thing is that you did mention in there the concept of a disability advisory group.
Yeah.
And maybe power of numbers. You could look at individual or regional disability advisory committees that can help with the lobbying, etc. Who can fully understand the limitations of what's achievable.
I certainly, I think if we're going to take this forward as an exercise, having those lived experience voices in there and getting ownership of what can be achieved and what and where we need to go, then certainly helps to protect council's position on that too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
for me that makes sense. I would also, sorry, I feel, my other thought on this was, and this goes to the breadth of what disability means. And you've worked through this with the plan and the workshop and all this stuff. Now, yeah, I'm neurodiverse, right? So but we've expanded the range of a lot of stuff in terms of discussions and disabilities. But that is not only important; it's very significant and as well. However, in our context, we've just got to my mind. But again, this will be informed by consultation and input. But I think that's why we really need to focus on some, if you like, the basics. And mobility is the most fundamental thing that affects people. People with profound mobility affecting disabilities, whatever they may be. And that could be, there's a range of different things that can cover. But to me, that's the first and best focus we can be putting our energy in as a council, as a community, is around those things, which is why I say things like toilets or ramps or whatever. Yeah, I really do think that, and I think it's a more pressing need, and it affects people's ability to, engage in everyday life much more profoundly. That's my take. Now,
what I was going to mention, I think it's probably worth mentioning, is that there are beginning to be a range of grant opportunities to access, but again, that takes resourcing to prioritise what it is that you want to achieve. We did, in fact, attempt to put in a submission a small grant to start the audit process. It was knocked back on the basis that it was council's core business, and that it didn't have an immediate, I remember the exact framing, but that it didn't have immediate
who's that to?
DHS.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to, they should be mentioned a little bit too. I mean, yeah.
We can, I'm sure, a letter can be worded.
Yeah. I don't wish to attack people who are trying to do the right thing with them. So it's more about raising concern. But it's a very classic central government thing to completely forget the obvious on the other side.
Any other comments?
Gary's heard my take on this too.
I was just going to say, is there anything that, like grants plus tourism, that whole disability tourism push is significant in particular regions? There's opportunities.
So one of the actions in the plan is to consider how disability is incorporated into the tourism precinct plan.
Yeah.
And there are possibilities. It's another thing that is worth mentioning is the Commonwealth occasionally provides opportunities for councils to access funding to put changing places toilet blocks, and it might be that just from my kind of take, it might be worth considering whether the tourism precinct, whether tourism precincts are a good place to contemplate the need.
I can certainly give a good example of my last actual visit assembly for the change of places. Has driven that sector significantly, which fits in very well with the the tourism plans and disability tourism and the whole economic benefit from that.
Good point.
Yeah, so with the tourism precinct plan project, we want to definitely sort of build in that accessibility lens to it, because for instance, Mount Waterfalls, at the moment, totally inaccessible, to anyone who can't, walk effectively,
And many things are good, they're good, just thinking about it, like they're potentially good passive, providing different types of activities is what I'm trying to say. We get people with a range of abilities can engage in different ways. So just providing that additional capacity. For example, as you say, Mount Wharf was a beautiful spot, but if you can't, if you're in a wheelchair or if you're otherwise mobility impaired in some fashion, difficult to actually access. And all it needs is a boardwalk and some seats.
Correct. Yeah.
And a unisex toilet or something like that.
Yeah. And the perfect example is the Great Ocean Road now.
Yeah.
You know, they turned that from something that was totally accessible to fully accessible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So again, a number of the actions are framed up like that. So when you're reviewing plans, you're considering how disability access and inclusion is incorporated. So it becomes another lens or so that it's not about doing discrete, separate, whether it's projects or activities, trying to embed it.
Like a disability access overlay over
Yes.
everything that we're doing.
Always.
Well, and
Yes.
it's also worth mentioning that if you have a disability access overlay, it also there's very similar I guess benefits for health and wellbeing, for physical activity, for inclusion of all. So you know,
Well,
people
it is,
with
we all get
plans.
old and we all have problems.
Yeah.
Or exactly,
Yeah.
with the converse.
Mm.
Family and families.
That's right.
Good discussion. Good discussion.
Anything online?
Any comments? Anybody online? No, we're okay. All right, well then I will put that motion. Those in favour? Those in favour, thank you. Carried.
May I also just say one extra thing on that? I really enjoyed the workshop that was held here. I thought it was a really good, very good mix of people, good range of things. So yeah, that's just a take on the process so far.
It's a fair way down there. Okay. There we go. So item 8.1 is the tourism update. With an attachment, which is a tourism ambassador program, and the recommendation is that the tourism update report on the Strategic Growth and Economic Activation Committee agenda on 28th of January 2026 be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Simone. That's open for discussion. And people, any information additional that we want to provide?
So this was obviously Andy's last report to this committee before his final day. So yeah, we don't want to Steve too much in the hot seat to answer any questions, but yeah.
I've certainly got through the trans one and we're catching up with the second one with Andy next week about myself to go through. And then Andy's giving a bit of an outline of the ambassador program as well. So I think it's sitting at about a dozen people that have signed up for that so far with and to go to the target of about 50 working towards.
Is there a spread across the region? People who are signed up for?
I can tell you that. Yeah.
I think that would be just an interest at some point again. Anybody else have any questions, queries about the ambassador program? No? Okay, well, we'll then go to the recommendation and I will put that motion.
Sorry, what is it? Are we also discussing has this one got the maritime stuff on, or are we in a different spot? Oh, sorry, we're in the tourism update, so that's the next
yeah,
one,
it's
is
the
it?
tour,
Or is that,
no, that is just a
it's a
copy
general thing,
of the motion that's
Okay.
moved to council.
right?
Okay. So this motion is simply about receiving the tourism update report. Okay. So we'll put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next, copies?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's carried, that's carried. Okay. Those were the three items on the agenda. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to bring up today? There are no questions without notice. There are no confidential reports. Anything else from anybody?
Well,
No, all good. Sorry, I've had some technical difficulties, so I've dropped in and out, but I have been here and my camera hasn't been working as well, so apologies for that.
That's okay. All right, so
well, I just wanted to raise one thing, but I am a little bit, I'll raise it and park it because I have a personal interest in it as well. But I recently attended one of these workshops for one of the 101 renewable projects going on around. This one was the Tungkillo BESS site. And I was chatting with a community member there about the cumulative impacts of all of these projects that are going on around the community. And Gary and I had a bit of a chat there also. So I think that there's a long-term strategic question for council around these assets. However, I have got one proposed next door to me, so I have a definitive conflict in terms of addressing it further. So I wouldn't want to do anything further other than just suggest that it's a matter to be considered, and if it is considered, I will perhaps consent myself from the conversation.
So through you, Mandy, Matt, we totally agree. Gary and I have had these conversations, and I think, Gary, it might be worth having a workshop or a discussion of what we've thought and the proposals that have been from the community, and how.
Yeah.
Because one of our challenges, Matt, and we've tried to approach, I can't remember which companies, Gary, one was all ready to go and the other one was going to be going in a year or two, and try to make sure they work together because it's impacting the same roads and the same communities and the same property owners. And we didn't really get much traction. So we feel there is an opportunity to have a more of a arching framework, I suppose, Gary, to try to manage these projects that are coming up, and there's going to be more.
That's right.
Yes.
So, and equally, I have a conflict of interest too, because I have a family member that also sits within the footprint of one of these projects. Yesterday at council briefing, I presented an update on a concept of community benefit sharing plans that these renewable companies are not required to provide, but are providing. So there is no legislative basis here in South Australia for benefit sharing. So these companies are utilising interstate guidelines as a basis for their engagement with the community. As per our conversation, Matt, at the information session, yes, there is a need for better collaboration between the different projects, and the difficulty, as Ben's alluded to, is the fact they're all at different stages of their process. Some are at the early pre-lodgement stage, some are at the assessment stage, some have got their approvals, they're just waiting to get funding. So getting that collective conversation around infrastructure impact is difficult. Hence why the spatial planning tool that we spoke about in the program is part of that solution, because it then allows us to input the different projects and their different parameters around their footprint. And then we can sort of start analysing what is the financial contribution that each of these projects should contribute to council. And the fact that they are at different stages, if we're negotiating with one that it's a 60-40 split and along comes a new project, how does that 60-40 then become 30-30-30? In
my particular area, we've got Blackheath Road runs up towards Mount Torrens there. That road, that there are a number of people who live on, rural properties through there, and there's a couple of large actual proper production type properties as well. But you've got an existing substation. There are two of these BESSs proposed within spitting distance of each other. We've already had impact. There was I can't think what it was, but there was a big truck that was essentially the flatbed fell. Had part of the equipment they couldn't come up the hill properly, and it fell off, and that wasn't even coming to one of these two. That was on its way down to the TEPCO site at the other end. So the impacts there are substantial, and then there'll be the impact. So that's an inconvenience impact, I suppose you'd say. But then there are also impacts in terms of what's going to happen to that road surface over time, all of that. So that's an impost on council, as well as an impost on the local residents there.
Can I suggest that we look at this as a question without notice for the, because I think it's a big issue.
For the full purpose of the minutes, yeah, I think that's.
Yeah,
probably
so
where-
it's there and
I wanted to raise it just to, because it has been a recent thing, but I'm also, I'm very conscious that I'm a landowner who lives in the area, so at some point, depending on the nature of conversations, I would take myself out of that. But it seems to me that there's a strategic question around how these. I mean, these projects are welcome in the area as a broad thing. They are, that's
But it's got to be
my
done.
perspective is these are
Yeah.
industrial job generators in there, but how are we managing that and
talking
what
about
are our levers of influence over
talking about minimising harm.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
for sure.
Mandy, through you, I'd maybe suggest that we either have a report, Gary, to the next meeting, or we do a workshop, because I agree with Matt, it is a strategic consideration for council and how we manage this moving forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Yeah, so, I mean, hopefully, Ben, I mean, even if we need to have a special meeting, I'd like to be in a position where, we can sort of say that the spatial tool might be somewhere in a working format that, so Dave and Kieran, they're playing the tool to sort of say it's working around what we need to do from a negotiation perspective, so that we can show council and the committee, that, it's going to assist us in negotiating future deed agreements. And obviously, yes, those conversations with council around the benefit sharing is a secondary component to that. I think infrastructure as its impact.
One is about cumulative impact is one, but benefit sharing is another aspect as well.
So I think we're dealing with the sharing benefit through this policy that will go to council in February, along with the idea of setting up a community foundation. But the infrastructure asset deed process, that's something that we really need to focus on. And one of the concepts that was discussed both in the sharing policy and more broadly is the notion of having that sort of coordinator type position where we through the renewables, we could fund a position or part-time position depending, and that person would then be the liaison between the renewable projects and council and community, so that those, that resource can be focusing on resolving some of those tension points. Because at the moment, our capacity as a council is stretched.
Well, we've just had that conversation about disability. I mean, these projects are. There's a reason why there are massive investors in these projects, because they're a license to print money, right? And that's cool. No one has any objection to that, providing an essential service, but they're making a big margin. So, even a small amount of that margin could fund half of our measures and get them done, That's the type of thing that, to my mind, that's an important part of people feeling that these are not just being imposed on, but they're actually making a contribution to the community. They can still make their margin.
And to that point, Matt, if we say part of this discussion we're having with these companies, Gary, and we say, let's do the audit and upgrade our public toilets through, because there's those communities of benefits that are directly benefiting from it and directly impacted, and then there's the whole region. And as Mayor Bailey will say, they're not paying rates, so they're not contributing to the general revenue that is helping for all of the infrastructure. And so we're trying to get that as much as we can, whilst we still advocate for them to pay rates on their infrastructure as well. So,
Good. Well, duly noted.
Thank you.
I think let's hold the conversation there, Mandy, and we'll come back with a report and a workshop.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Declare the meeting closed, with the next meeting to be held here at Cambrai at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, the 29th of April, 2026. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
See ya.
Have a good day. Bye.